In this guide, I'll be going over some of the changes to rapid fire rogues in patch 1.1 and updating the cold rapid fire build that was used to complete a tier 100 nightmare in the preseason. This build will still be great this season once the endgame gets fixed, as it's even better than before. Blizzard recently hotfixed nightmare dungeons to make them much easier, but they made them way too easy and they said they will be retuned soon. This build is designed to deal with the hardest content, so it will scale well with higher difficulty once the nightmares get retuned back. In this video, I'll also be going over a second rapid fire build that can be used in the meantime using one of the new Wrathful Hearts that can quickly farm tier 100s while they are easy. I'll also be going over the Malignant Hearts for rapid fire rogues. This is a list of the changes that happened in 1.1 for the cold rapid fire build. And as you can see, for rogues themselves, there were mostly buffs. For rapid fire, I had these into offense and defense and other. And for offense, there were a lot of nice buffs for this build. For example, we run Penitent Greaves. So this advanced rapid fire duration that happens when you evade, and the Penitent Greaves don't have the implicit evade cooldown reduction effect. So this is really nice so that we can always have the 30% crit damage for rapid fire, so we don't have to run any of the other boots. We can just run the Penitent Greaves. And the smoke grenade buff is also great. I've been testing some of the different gloves in the preseason, and I was gonna run the frostbitten gloves anyways, and this is just an extra 5% damage for the smoke grenade. Um, this doesn't really matter. Concealment is this buff is nice because the playstyle for this build is we do burst for the rapid fires. The cold bead rapid fires, we do two cold bead rapid fires to freeze them, and then after the burst, we try to run and live while they're unstoppable. And this concealment buff is nice just to have more duration to run away. This buff doesn't really matter. And the siphoning strikes, this is a big nerf, but for this build, we don't really need it because we're not uh, taking that much damage. Um, so I actually don't even run this passive anymore in the build. I changed some of the skill points around. And then other than that, there were a lot of the universal nerfs to stats for all classes. Um, but this is offset by some of the effects on the hearts, which are some of them are pretty powerful, which can offset this. So for the planners, I made one for the cold rapid fire build for nightmare pushing, and I made another build that is using one of the new Wrathful Hearts for farming high nightmares while they're so easy. So first I wanted to go over the new hearts for rapid fire rogues, like how they work and which ones are good. So for the hearts, they each amulet or ring rolls with a specific color for the gem socket. So for example, like this one is brutal. So if it's brutal, then you can only put a brutal gem into it. But a wrathful gem, you can have one in total, and you can put a wrathful gem into any color socket. So So these are the vicious ones. There's vicious, brutal, devious, and wrathful. For the vicious, this one doesn't really matter. This is more probably for proccing some of the trap effects for grenade builds. And this one is actually great for this build because rapid fire has a high crit chance due to one of its passives. And we also have a lot of crit damage multipliers, such as improved rapid fire, um, the key passive, precision, and the frostbitten gloves. So crit damage is almost all of our damage anyways. So for this, the level 5 would actually have 85% increased crit damage, and you can see the crit damage is additive, um, and the non-critical strikes damage is multiplicative less. So this would add just a flat 85% crit damage. So for this layout that's on here, we have about 280%. So then you would add 85% to the 280, which would be 365. So in total, like for this layout that's on here, it would be about a 30% increase in crit damage for the crits, but that would be a bit less than 30% when counting the reduced critical strikes, but that doesn't really matter as much. Um, so depending on how much crit damage with imbued you also have, it would be somewhere between it would be around a 25% damage increase, 20 to 25%. So it's actually really great for this build. Dark Dance would be the other option. For pushing Nightmare, I just didn't want to consume life to increase power with damage because you're so close to being one shot anyways. And this is just such a great damage amplifier. And then this one is actually great for leveling. I feel like it just wouldn't scale into the late game with its damage output, but it would proc the disobedience. But I just don't think it's that good for the end game. So for this one, I am pretty sure that this is just like a flat 20% damage reduction, which would be what it's used for. That's what it sounds like, and that's what it seems like from testing. So this is just fantastic, and you should try to run this whenever you can. The Revenge. This one is, I don't know why it's even in here for rogues, for all this barrier generation stuff. Um, this one, it would be okay. It's just on really high nightmare, you get one shot anyway, so this I don't think it would even proc if you just get one shot from the hit. So I don't think it's that good. Um, and this one's kind of interesting. The uh, the Shadow Decoy Trap. It on level. I feel like it's better at level 1 than the upgraded level 5 version because the level 1 version, the trap actually lasts longer, which is kind of interesting. So it taunts for longer. So this is the second best brutal gem. So if you happen just to have two brutal gems in your gear, this would be the second best one. I probably wouldn't run it for endgame because the I've done some testing with it and it's just the taunt like it sometimes taunts, sometimes it just doesn't. So I just want something that's more reliable. The devious, most of these are pretty useless for rapid fire rogues. Um, the only one that might be worth taking if you do happen to have a devious slot is this one uh, because it's great against some of the resource draining effects that are in the game, like such as the new devious elites. They're actually pretty annoying, so this one might be okay. Um, and then the Wrathful Hearts. So on paper, it seems like a lot of these would be good. Um, Creeping Death. This would be great for like a more of a poison based build. But I did some testing with the poison imbue with this specific build, and with just 1 point in it, it just doesn't do much damage anyway, so this wouldn't really matter. The barber, I feel like it's terrible for when you're not doing like super high nightmare, just because it delays the damage. The mobs don't even die at first, but for high nightmare, this is incredible for the damage output. Um, it would just take some time for them to die, but it doesn't matter because on really high nightmare, they would it takes a lot of time for them to die anyway, so the damage would really amp up. So actually for this build, we would run the Barber. This one, I don't think it's that good just because it keeps changing. Some of the other effects like the resource and the barrier don't really help. Vile Apothecary actually has a lot of potential, and this is actually the gem that we're running in the other build that I mentioned. And it sounds really cool, and I think it'll be great for that build. You just have to put more points into the imbuements, and for this build, I don't have enough skill points for that. Um, so then for the rest of this build, I changed the paragons slightly. I kind of rotated some of the things around, but it's the same boards. But I did manage to free up a couple um, nodes, which I put into vulnerable damage just because we have lower vulnerable damage from the gear, and I think this build will be a lot about burst, so I put a couple more points into vulnerable, but the rest of it is the same. Um, So the skill tree, it's pretty much the same as before. Uh, I took the points out of siphoning strikes just because I don't think it's that helpful since it doesn't proc that often and we're at range a lot anyways. Um, I put more points into Dark Shroud. You can see I have 12 because for some of the gear, Dark Shroud is just so important for the high difficulty. And yeah, we're running the smoke grenade now for the frostbitten gloves. And yeah, other than that, it's the same. There's 3 skill points that you can kind of change around depending on the dungeon. If there's damage over time effects, you can run the rugged. But if not, you could even do maybe something like concussive and knockdown for a bit more crit chance. But that just depends on the dungeon. So there's 3 skill points that you can move around. And other than that, it's pretty much the same as last season. So for the equipment, a lot of the stats kind of got nerfs universally, but they're still best run. Like for the helmet, we're still running the same stats like cooldown interaction, total armor, even though those things got nerfed. So we're also running the red gems because max life is. I found it's a lot better as a range build on High Nightmare than the topazes because we just don't want to get one shot. And with the topazes, if you're getting crowd controlled and you're getting hit on High Nightmare, like you're dead anyways. It doesn't really matter how many topazes you have. So then for the chest and legs, it's the same. We're still running all the damage reaction stats. They're still good even though they got nerfed. For the legs, I definitely want to go for the Dark Shroud stats on legs for when it's High Nightmare and when they fix High Nightmare so that it's hard. Just because the ranks on Dark Shroud get better when you have more ranks of them. So I'm gonna plan to try to get some legs with that, and you also want to run the legs with implicit barrier as it helps a lot. And yeah, so I've tested a lot of the gloves in the preseason, and I'm gonna plan to run smoke grenade and frostbitten just because it helps a lot with the burst. I actually don't even use this for the smoke grenade freeze. I mostly use it for the crit damage. Um, I usually I open with the daze while I'm running in, and then I apply vulnerable with puncture, and then I start cold imbuing. Um, but the frostbitten it still helps a ton for the crit damage because it's more about burst. And then the disobedience got nerfed down to it maxes out at 30%, but it actually doesn't really change much for this build because we're more doing hit and run tactics anyways, so it didn't really stack up to full anyways. It actually doesn't change much for this build. And so running Pent and Grieve still, these are even better now due to the rapid fire, the crit damage lasting for 5 seconds after evade, so that it doesn't even matter if we don't have other boots that have cooldown evade reaction effects. For the weapon, I actually tested bows for a while, and I tried to run just only forceful arrow, but I was having energy issues, so even though crossbows got nerfed, it's definitely still the best with this build, and it's the same stuff as before. For the amulet, I changed a few of the stats here actually from last season. Last season I ran with damage reaction and armor on the amulet instead of move speed and subterfuge skills. But for this season, I'm going to try to find one with move speed and subterfuge skills. For the subterfuge skills, that just adds more Dark Shroud points, and the more Dark Shroud points you have, the better it is. Um, and then the subterfuge skills also just buffs the cooldown on some of the other subterfuge skills that we use, such as concealment and smoke grenade. Um, so I think this is probably better than damage reduction because the Dark Shroud, we usually have either 4 or 5 shrouds around us anyways when it's really hard content, because if we get down to like 2 or 3, we're dead anyways. So I think this will give more damage reduction than damage reduction or armor. And then for the rings, it's the same. For the rings and the amulet, it's going to be a bit hard to find the right ones because you need like the gems with a certain color in it. Um, so if you don't have like the perfect stats, like these are the perfect stats, like vulnerable damage, crit chance, max life. Um, this is the perfect stats for High Nightmare. But if you can't find these, it's fine. It's better to have the right combination of gem colors than it is to have perk stats. So if you have like crit damage imbued or even just like lucky hit, like that's probably fine if you can have the right colored gems. And also it's I feel like lightning resistance is kind of important on the rings just because lightning effects they're really tough for rogues to deal with. At least three of them. Shock lines isn't that bad, but the other three are really tough as a rogue. And other than that, like the aspects are the same. Um, yeah, so for skills, I use two generators. The puncture is still rogue's best generator, but it can only apply vulnerable when the mobs are really close. So I use forceful arrow to apply vulnerable when they're far away, because every third cast applies vulnerable. And I also use it to build combo points to prepare for a rapid fire for later, like once they're not unstoppable anymore. So what I do now is I smoke grenade first to daze, and then apply vulnerable with puncture, and do cold imbued rapid fires and do stun locks, two freezes in a row to stun lock them, and then once they become unstoppable, I kite away and using concealment or just running away. So that's basically the play style of Rogue, and I think I think this build will be even better than it was last season with a lot of the changes. Um, this the build would have even beat Tier 100 Nightmare this season, even if they didn't nerf the difficulty. Uh, Even with some of the armor changes and damage reduction changes, I think this build would have still been able to deal with that content. So once they fix the end game, this build will be fantastic. So then I just want to quickly go over this build right here, which is using the Vile Apothecary Wrathful Heart. Um, so Paragon's the exact same. So for skills, I swapped some of the points from Dark Shroud and some of the defensives over to the imbuements, because this is more for farming than it is for pushing like really hard difficulty. So with the Wrathful Heart, you have a chance to proc all imbuements effects. So we run a lot of these passives. So it would proc stuff like debilitating toxins, alchemical advantage, and then for the Shadow Imbuement, it would proc vulnerable and the crit chance against injured. So I think it would just be great overall to proc these things. You even proc the slows, chilling weight, cold imbuement. So I think this has a lot of potential for farming uh, the High Nightmare for the season. So the first thing you might have noticed is the gems. I have topazes here because this is for farming for not like the highest difficulty, but for pretty high difficulty. So the topazes are great for when you're doing that sort of activity because you don't have to play as if you're doing like a hitless run. You can kind of like take some damage, take some crowd controls. So this would just be great for survival for that, better than the rubies. For the helm, you can also for this build you can take one of the other uh, stats such as maybe like total armor and max life, and you can change that to a poison imbuement if you want to, just for some more damage. Um, Other than that, it's basically the same stats. For the legs, I I don't run the Dark Shroud stats for this. It would be total armor instead, just because you can get hit more. It doesn't really matter. Um, for the gloves, there's actually some other aspects that might be good, such as I want to try Noxious Ice. I think this would be great when applying all the imbuements. It might even be better than Frostbitten because Frostbitten is kind of like overkill when you're farming. It's just like too much crit damage because they're like dead anyways. And then Share and Misery is the other option. This would just be great for slowing and freezing everything when farming. So probably I would actually probably switch this to one of those two. But I'll have to do more testing with that to see which one's the best. Um, oh, I forgot to mention for the first build, I I run the rapid fire aspect on the weapon, but I swap to Edge Masters. I have a different crossbow that I swap to when dealing with a single target elite. Um, so I swap between those. I do the rapid fire normally, and then I swap to Edge Masters when I deal with like a single tough target. So for this farming build, I actually just run the Edge Masters and the amulets, so I don't have to bother like swapping things around. Um, and I run this instead of the enshrouding because I don't need the extra damage reduction. And then the other changes, we run the +3 to all imbuement skills here instead of the subterfuge because we don't need the defense. And for the hearts, it's the same hearts, the 20% damage reduction and the crit damage, but we're also running the vile imbuements to proc all the imbuements. And then for skills, I took the points out of Forceful Arrow just because we don't really need to go from range. We can just kind of take hits with puncture in close range. And I I am running Poison View for the last skill slot just for a bit more damage. But I think this build will be fantastic for the current tier 100 because the current tier 100 is like the old Nightmare 70, so it's very easy to tank damage, and so this is more of a damage focused build that you can try in the meantime. But yeah, hopefully this guide gave you a bit of more details on the changes to 1.1 for the cold rapid fire build, as well as just some of the new playstyles you can do for the new patch. And yeah, hopefully Blizzard fixes the end game because Tier 100 is just like way too easy right now.